Good evening and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Ulysses Town Board. I will call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. It is Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. May we please have a roll call?
Yes, we may. Mr. Goldman.
Present.
Olson.
Present.
Ms. Bouchard.
Present.
Mr. Boggs.
Present.
Ms. Weatherby is absent so far.
She may be able to join us, but it's not looking promising based on where she is in Pennsylvania at a planning board meeting. So for her job. We have a meeting agenda that was posted last week. Are there any alterations, additions or subtractions that are needed? If not, I'll call for.
I have a question.
Yes.
How come clean is in two places here?
So we're gonna have a discussion. They're gonna do a presentation. We can move things around once we approve it. The Jacksonville Community Association is actually gonna present closer to 8 o'clock. So we're not gonna work through directly. But typically I break out conversation from the actual presentation, but if we want, we can move the conversation immediately thereafter. That was my intention. It just doesn't fall into our old business. So.
Move to approve as presented.
Wonderful.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, first up is privilege of the floor. Anyone in person or online who wishes to address the town board is welcome to on any matter. They're entitled to 3 minutes, and I go back and forth, starting in person and then online, and then we go back and forth until everybody who's had an opportunity to say their piece has had that opportunity. So is there anybody in person who wishes to address the town board? Okay, is there anybody online who wishes to address the town board? Okay, final call. Anybody anywhere, either online or in person, who wishes to address the town board? Okay, then we will move on. And I'd like to welcome Clean up for a presentation. You're welcome to come up here. We have a speaker up here, and I know you're also going to be sharing slides. And so I've been speaking most directly with Kate Darfler, but I'm assuming you'd like to do introductions of everybody you have and whatnot. So please feel free to come up.
Sure.
All right, good evening. I'm Kate Darfler. I am on the Ulysses Conservation Sustainability Advisory Committee, and we last month, I believe it was, got to hear from Clean about some of the issues going on with the Cargill Salt Mine, specifically a newer issue that hasn't been brought up to the town board before about brine disposal in some areas of the mine within the borders of the town of Ulysses. And so the CSAC committee were unanimous in bringing something forward to the town board. It's a little unclear about what the best options are, but we all really wanted the town to seriously consider this environmental issue. And so I would like to welcome Clean up. We have George Pat is here, and John Dennis and Stephanie Redmond representing Clean. And I'll let you guys take over from there.
Thank you, Kate. And Kate, you forgot to mention that you are a co-founder of the.
I was back in the day. Yes, I worked with and helped found Clean. So it's been a while since I got to work with these guys, but again.
Well, you're very good at naming things, so I imagine you had a role in the naming of this also.
I didn't. That
Really?
was Michael Gopinkel actually.
Well, it's a great one.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
George Pat again is my name. I was a 42-year resident of the west shore of the lake and have since moved over the other eastern part of the lake, but know and love Hugo Lake dearly, and it's part of my involvement with Clean on its steering committee, working with John and Stephanie, Kate too. So what we have done is we came to learn about this proposal that Cargill had made to DEC. I think in June of 2023 is when they made their proposal to use a cavern no longer used. And by the way, the cavern And as we go, John may want to chime in with a slide or two to show the location of things, but we'll call it as we go, John, kind of ad hoc. But anyway, the West Shore we're talking about is essentially the old Crowbar Point. It's what I call it, but it's the Girl Scout camp area. Everybody probably knows that area, down to about the yacht club, right along the West Shore of the lake. So once we learned of this, the proposal was to take what apparently is an abandoned part of the site mine. They've got excess water, which we have many questions on actually, but they want to dump that water, pump it over into this cavern that exists there along those 2 points. And it, on the screen that John put up, thanks, John, is in white, right? Yes, I'm more used to seeing it in yellow, but here we have white. Kind of, I assume everybody can make out the bright white area that is southerly, okay? And that would be between that point, that Crowbar Point, and the I don't know, it's roughly 2 miles, give or take, that distance. Certain. John, have you got a little pointer there?
Yeah, Crowbar Point is.
There's the northerly right there, and Yacht Club Point is about 2 miles south. And that cavern runs right along through there, a certain distance off the West Shore. Well, that got us to thinking that while it's certainly a DEC related matter on their oversight of certain aspects of mining, it also certainly in our minds and in our hearts too about the lake and the way we feel about the lake, it's a local issue. And so we set about looking at your Ulysses and have made a review, and we've had some input from council on our behalf to take a look at that. And a couple of important things. There's a lakeshore zone there, of course, that you have in your code at chapter 212. And that part of the code sets forth in 212-2, just to give a quote, that any use not specifically permitted is expressly prohibited. So when you look at what's allowed in that zone, that lakeshore zone along the West Shore, 1 and 2 bedroom homes, residences, and I think certain utility uses that would be necessary to accommodate the public needs. And and there's certain accessory uses like maybe an in-laws type of structure, but pretty limited through there. That's what it is. And they define the zoning boundaries to run, and this is I think important, to the center line of the lake. It doesn't just run along the shore. It runs, and we have some support for this, to the center line of the lake, because in 212-11D of your code, it's important enough to read to you, I think. It says the following: where a zoning district boundary line follows a stream or the shoreline of a lake or other body of water, said boundary line shall be deemed to follow the center line of the stream or be deemed to be at the limit of the town of Ulysses unless otherwise noted. So accordingly, we think that takes to the center line of the lake, and probably 99% or maybe even 100% of this area is within the town of Ulysses as
soft mission flower torch here
Wait,
or a hard.
Would you mind muting, please? Thanks.
Okay, so then you go to the lakeshore zone itself. And the purposes of the lakeshore zone are spelled out in 212-42A. And that basically is to protect it. And the language you use is to protect the fragile environment of the lakeshore. That area east of State Route 89 to the center line of Cuba Lake, in accordance with the town of Ulysses comprehensive plan, is one goal. And 2, to provide a regulatory framework to which development can occur with minimal environmental impact. Of course, we're talking about environmental impact. Some of the wording you see on the screen summarizes a bit of what I'm about to get to. Thanks, John, for putting that up. We think essentially that since the use is not permitted, it's not a legal use. That in fact, if Cargill wants to make use of it in the way they've laid it out, it would actually take a Board of Zoning Appeals hearing. And it would have to be allowed only through the variance process, a use variance, in other words. It's not a permitted use. So there is, I think, a procedure. We don't have to get into in much detail right now, but certainly we want to make it known that we think that a complaint could be put before, not you necessarily. I think it probably is a ZBA matter, zoning board appeals. And they should hopefully entertain that process and hear from concerned citizens like we are at Clean. So in a nutshell, that really is what our research has shown. We've looked at various aspects of planning, planning board, but tonight we've thought, in looking specifically at what you have in the code on zoning, that the most direct point we can make is to look at your zoning, look at the Lake Shore District. And while it's not your specific function tonight, we hope that we have a cooperative and a good ear for our approach, which we mean to be, by the way, cooperative. Not coming in any sense except as a community member. That's the way we've worked primarily. And we also look to, okay, if there's law, we should look at what the code says. That's what I've pointed out here.
So George, let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
So are you saying that Cargill completely didn't know, do you know if they knew about the zoning or they just completely ignored it?
we think they basically ignored it. It's never, to our knowledge, come before the Ulysses the regulatory bodies or
Right.
lawful authorities in any manner. So why would a major corporation like that choose to put this into DEC? Now, has the state somehow preempted this area and said, look, Ulysses and all you localities, back off. This is not your bailiwick. We don't think so. Your zoning should be honored. And we've also asked council, is that a viable legal proposition? And we've been told it is. That your local zoning has a basic home rule law principle, if you will.
So how is DEC been involved so far?
The permit application was granted in 2021 to the last one, that is, to operate. 2023, they came along and said, we'd like to modify that operating permit, DEC. We didn't know about it at the time. We learned about it months later. And that's been pending, and DEC has had questions, good faith questions for them. And they've gone, to our knowledge, John, you can chime in if we are not aware of a specific response that Cargill has made, even to the DEC questions, much less ours. So zoning so far, hasn't come into the picture.
And DEC wouldn't necessarily care about our zoning, or should they? Should they have cared?
I had a question.
Yeah.
I had a question, like a more fundamental question, which is, who owns the land that these salt mines are occurring on? Is it DEC owned, or is it New York State owned, or is it owned by Cargill?
Cargill has what's called a consent order in place from the state, and that comes via something called the Office of General Services, OGS. And they have granted Cargill rights subject to DEC approval to operate there. And it goes back some decades, actually. But the most recent permit, as I said, is 21. They asked to modify it in 23. Ownership, the state of New York, there's probably not much question that the state owns it, but it's subject to, we believe, your jurisdiction. Your jurisdiction, we believe, and your code so states, it runs to the center line of Cuba Lake, and it's solidly within the Lake Shore District that we kind of summarized. So this is the S3 part of the 6-level mine in Ulysses, as you can see outlined there. Thanks, John. Cargill basically has up till now abandoned that area, and now all of a sudden they want to say, let's flood it. We have a lot of water issues, let's throw the water over there. That could pose geological risk, danger. We've got geological opinion. Kate has chimed in with some helpful things as a geologist. We have a professional geologist who we consult with on an almost daily basis, and he has concerns. So that,
So why don't I speak to some of those?
Yes, yeah.
We're almost 11 minutes. so
Okay,
we're
yep.
gonna pick up the pace here. And I'm gonna speak from here. George is more fit than I am. He plays tennis every day.
And he's a very good tennis player.
So this slide here, we're not against salt mining. De-icing plays an important role, keeping our highways safe in the wintertime. But there's another much smaller company. Their gross revenue and was 40 million in 2022 compared to 177 billion for Cargill. Cargill's the largest private corporation in North America, and they have more or less told the DC that they actually don't recognize New York State's right to control their underground mining. So the 3.5 million in financial assurance is just for cleaning up the surface operations. And there's no closure plan for this mine, nothing significant. But comparing these two mines, American Rock Salt, I've toured their mine, I'm familiar with their staff. One of their staff used to work for the DC, and they say, we welcome regulation, but they're producing about 4.3 million tons of salt a year compared to Cargill. So they're almost twice as productive. They've got more employees, the unionized workforce, 2 geologists on staff. Cargill has no geologists. Mining in the lake, yes, for Cargill, no. And there's a reason Cargill likes to be underwater. Their other mine in Cleveland is also underwater. The specific gravity of water is 1, so you can take more salt away per acre, just because you don't have as much weight to hold up. And there's only one owner, so you do a deal with New York State, and suddenly you're golden. You can just keep going up the lake. But they are about to run out of runway. They have maybe we think they'll have exhausted their salt reserves by 2032. Environmental impact statements. American Rock Salt's done 2 in the past 23 years. Cargill has never done one in 53 years. And we could tell you of multiple times when there have been significant adverse, environmental risks. Good reason, for it to be a type 1 action. Cargill's had 6 fatalities since they bought the mine. American Rock Salt 0. And these last numbers, the last row, it's due to the fact that Cargill is mining in a very anomalous area. They're using larger and larger pillars to hold the mine up under the lake. So their extraction ratio is down to 43% compared to 60% for Hampton Corners. We think this is why Cargill put their mine for sale last June or July, and they hired Deutsche Bank to try to find a buyer. There were a number of buyers, and I've been told recently that after doing their due diligence, none of them want the mine. So there's a possibility Cargill could just shut this mine down. We think that it's already long overdue, because even if it floods, if it shuts down today and is flooded, that's a vast reservoir of brine, which may begin seeping up into the lake, further salinizing it. So I'll talk a little bit about risk, because obviously if the mine collapses and the lake water pours in, that's an emergency where there's a hydraulic connection between the lake and the mine. When the Retzoff mine collapsed in 1994, there was what's called a rubble chimney that went all the way to the surface, and the surface was basically cornfields and a small creek. So some water from the surface went down, but that rubble chimney went up through 3 aquifers, freshwater aquifers, and the deepest of those got salinized, and the mine took 15 months to flood. And after that, everybody lost their jobs. The Hampton Corners mine was founded about 3 years later, just to the east of the Retzoff mine. But there is a similar geology. We worry that a similar sort of collapse from the rubble chimney would happen. And Cargill is mining under various anomalies. I'll just point anomalies A through E were defined in 2010. And then in 2017, Cargill produced a map that downsize them from these red circles to these blue circles. So millions of dollars more of salt was freed up. But anyway, those are technical issues. We can always come back to those. George has talked about, so we're urging, the town to use its existing zoning code to basically say, hello, Cargill, you've never actually reached out to us as far as we know. We'd like you to apply for a variance for if you're going to continue to dump brine into the S3 portion. The reason that Cargill abandoned the S3 section is that it was geologically unstable. They originally in 2004 had a plan to mine all of this area. There's several thousand acres south of here. Anyway, I think that's enough for now. We'll open it up to questions. Thanks so much for the privilege
You know,
of
if I
being here
I
tonight.
could add one important thing. If this matter should, in the right due course, come before your ZBA, we think it would probably lead the ZBA to look into the secret law, the State Environmental Quality Review, and there would be a process through which there would have to, in any reasonable view of that statute and that process, there'd have to be some disclosure. What are you doing? Tell us about this. What are the dangers? Why are you doing it this way? Any number of questions would come up through that process.
Even
And-
before the secret process, if they're in violation of the zoning.
Yeah.
They would deny the variance just on that pretty much.
That could be. Unless, you can always try to make a hardship case or whatever under various provisions of zoning, but. We think they'd be hard put to do it, but I'm not sitting here in judgment on that final conclusion, but certainly we wanted to put before you. You've got a lakeshore zone, you've got a code. Can't something be done to follow your process?
So I would preface it by saying that, I think this is a very serious issue. I think that the risk, I think a collapse would be catastrophic. I have a number of concerns. One of my concerns is that Cargill doesn't respond to New York State, who's a much bigger fish than we are. That's concerning to me. And so question is, do you know where, so we have the letter from, I think it was at January 24th, somewhere around there. In January of 2024, where DEC responded about the permitting process. Do we know if is Cargill not responded to that? I was just wondering where they are in the permitting process for the additional flooding.
That January 24th,
That's a notice of incomplete application.
Yes.
I think it was January 17th.
Okay,
We have not yet foiled to see if what Cargill has sent in. We should probably do that tomorrow. Thanks for jogging my memory on that. But these things tend to be slow moving. The Cargill applied for the change in the permit in July of last year. So it took half a year for the DEC to say, oh, we need more information. Now here we are in July again, and
you're preaching to the choir. It took us like 9-10 months to get a contract from the DEC for a comp plan update. So it's real hard to get responses sometimes. So I do feel your pain on that. So that would be really helpful information to know because that's something. So I was able to briefly talk to town council today. And I think we have right now more questions than I think, and we'll have a discussion. We can move, or do you feel comfortable moving into the discussion phase? And you're welcome to participate and as we have questions in that process.
Ms. Olson, could I?
Yes.
I referred to several highlights.
Yep,
And I have copies for your members.
wonderful.
Just so.
That would be great. Thank
So
you.
there's 4 of you.
And that would be sure. Yep, you can.
Oh, sure, I've got several
Thank you.
copies here, but I thought it might be helpful to
Is that it?
leave that in, thank you. Maybe I should have a seat. Get out of the way here.
Let me just
and
get a-
George, the 5-pager, are you gonna have it?
I think maybe as part of discussion, we could address that. Yeah.
So normally this would probably first come to the planning. Wouldn't it?
Well, and that's really actually where the question becomes, and it's one of the larger questions is that. And when I say this, I'm speaking very broadly, is that ownership really has a really important determination factor. In where the town can be engaged most appropriately, and I think we haven't clarified yet from a legal counsel perspective where that is, because it typically is that a lower level of government, unless enabling legislation is passed, is not allowed to regulate. We can down regulate, but we cannot up regulate. So for instance, in the city of Ithaca has historic districts. The courthouse and the property owned by Tompkins County is not subject to city of Ithaca regulation. In terms, it is the subject to New York State Building Code, which is handled by the city. But for instance, the local preservation laws don't apply because the city of Ithaca can't tell Tompkins County, a higher level of government, what it can do. The question becomes who really owns this. If the answer had been Cargill, that's a very different conversation than New York State. And I think we need to parse that out. There may be, and I think that's where some work is necessary. And I will give you a parallel example of what's happening in the town of Ulysses currently. If you drive by Deganic State Park, you will have seen that there's clearance happening and there's development happening on the park property related to the installation of an 80-car facility, like 80-car parking lot and facilities related to the northern entrance, the upper entrance of Deganic State Park. That plan didn't come before the planning board because we've not been deemed subject to be able to oversee that. However, when it came to stormwater management, it is coming before the town because there's a state law that requires stormwater management to be reviewed and approved by the locality. So it's this weird amalgamation where the town has to sign off on that stormwater plan, but doesn't have to sign off on the planning of the facilities themselves because it's owned by New York State. And our regulations in that case have been deemed to not be able to control their development. So that doesn't mean though that the town has no ability in this case. It just means we need to, that's why I was asking some questions. I think if the town board has additional questions, we can ask them of you, we can ask them of our town attorney.
But you're saying if New York State owns it, we really can't do anything.
That may be the ultimate determination. Like we could pass, I know there's been conversation about a moratorium potentially. We might not be found to have standing to issue. We could issue a moratorium. That would be a local law. We'd have to go through the local law process. But if the property owner doesn't have to follow our regulations under state law, then a moratorium doesn't have any impact. It would prevent everybody else from doing salt mining on privately owned land. But it doesn't necessarily prohibit New York State from permitting it on their own land. And I think that's where the question becomes, is there enabling legislation that would empower the town? And it's a question of home rule. Does home rule by itself be sufficient in empowering it? And I think these are important legal questions that I think we need to have answered because I would imagine if Cargill is the largest private, what is it? Yes, I bet they're pretty litigious.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's with whatever path, but that doesn't mean that it would be devastating to the entire economy, not to mention the environment, most importantly, and all the humans and animals and critters who occupy our space if that becomes polluted by salt. So that's not me saying I don't think this is a big issue. It means where's the proper path that we could consider the town has an appropriate role to play. And I think we do have some more questions that we're going to need to.
Can I offer one comment?
Sure.
Or maybe if it's appropriate, that is.
Of course, no, please go ahead.
Okay. We're at the stage now where we are talking important legal principles.
Mhm.
And our council has looked into this. I know the town, of course, has its legal counsel. I wonder if it might be appropriate to have council engaged in some formal or informal fashion, hopefully friendly.
That's fine. And what does your council say? They say we do have jurisdiction?
Yeah, yes. Yes.
One other point I'd add on this slide. Where is that number? Over in you can see 344 acres of mineral rights are owned by Cargill under land in the town of Ulysses, of which they have already mined about 31 acres. So I did have a conversation with the former senior mine engineer, and he said, when we're done mining at the north end of the mine, we're going to circle back. And because I said, why didn't you finish mining, in this? And it could be just the fact that rock is heavier than water.
Absolutely.
Hey, we make more money when we're mining underwater, but when we're up against that northern end, we're gonna circle back. So even if a moratorium did not apply to the underwater portion, there is still some, 300 acres of mineral rights which Cargill might circle back and begin using under land. So the moratorium could still have some effect there.
Sure.
That's essentially the Cuban interest right there.
And so with moratoriums, I do know that they have like a time limit. So a moratorium is traditionally legally used to kind of put a pause so that you can get your zoning ducks in order. And so the real solution is never a moratorium. That's like a stopgap measure to get your zoning in order. And I believe it's a year is the traditional, the moratorium phase, and you can extend it with just cause for an additional, I don't remember, it's 6 to 12 months, but it's a finite period with moratoriums. But you can prohibit things if you're allowed to prohibit them through zoning. So that's usually with things like with strip clubs are always the example. You have to allow it to happen in some place. I don't know, we would have to look to see if we had the ability to prohibit mining completely. Usually you have to allow things in a certain location. You can't prohibit them right out if they are legal activities, but that's farther down. But that's very good to know. I was unaware of that, that they may have that they have mineral right ownership.
Well, no further questions. Thank you very much.
Well, let's just understand, the path you're suggesting we take is to have our building code inspector,
It wouldn't be Mark, it'd have to be Niels because he's the zoning officer.
Right.
Zoning
have the
officer.
zoning officer issue what
Well,
would he issue?
yeah, well.
A cease and desist
One
order?
of the things we're thinking about is I think that zoning officer he or she has to have before that person a complaint. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that's what our council has taught us. Clean has yet to decide, should we actually go ahead and file that complaint?
Why wouldn't you?
Well, we may well choose to do that. However, if there's some other path that is more agreeable, maybe council could explore that, but perhaps not. Maybe it's got to go to ZBA, and be hashed out there.
Yeah, I think we really need to know who has jurisdiction here. It's the main question.
I agree. And I think maybe having attorneys talk to each other
Yeah,
directly is probably a reasonable solution because different minds can differ on interpretation.
And if I could offer one other thing, our primarily relying upon some of our own legwork and what council has told us, we, John, Stephanie, I with some input from Kate, but primarily we three here because we're on the steering committee. We put together a 5-page document I'm willing to share with you, and perhaps it could be passed along to council.
Sure.
I have it here.
yeah, definitely.
It goes into, a bit more detail than perhaps I did or summarized.
Would it be possible also to get an electronic copy? You have my email address. Would you mind just forwarding that? Because I'm happy to take a hard copy now, but
Yep.
frankly, it saves me scanning it.
Well,
That's not gonna.
I've got several
Awesome. Thank
here,
you.
and I'd be happy to share those. This is, at this point, I'd like to state that this product is our work product, but we had some input from council.
Okay, great.
And leave it.
Mr. Patton, I have those.
Yes.
Thank you. And don't forget your water bottle over here.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any additional questions? Thank you so much for Clean or for the town attorney that I can pass on in advance of council having a conversation. Just a sec.
Look later. Or are we gonna?
So my strong recommendation would be, I think we need to find a little more information before we to make a lot of declaratives. So I was not planning on to act on it tonight. Yep. Any more questions? Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it's very helpful to have that. So I very much appreciate. I've been on the advocacy side. I know how much time you're putting into it. So, or I can only appreciate how much time I think you're putting into it, which is probably more than even I appreciate. So,
If you'd like the contact information for our council, or if your council wants
Yes.
to reach out, I
yep,
can provide that. or
that would be
not.
wonderful. I would say email me whatever you can email me and we can put our highly paid councils together.
Yes.
But does the town board have any questions for the town attorney related to this? Town board, any questions you want me to pass on to Nate?
People are already gonna run it by him.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
So what are our options?
okay, yeah, sure. And then I would like to, if Clean's amenable to it and the board's amenable to it, open up to the public quickly if there's any questions from the public to Clean. Sure. Is that okay? Ms. Rose, would you like to?
Well, I had a question about whether or not the conditions of the mining underground or release of brine. If there are particular industrial processes in that the town could consider outline. As was the approach with natural gas and fracking, wasn't fracking. That was outlawed. It was the heavy trucks, the unknown land of chemicals, the injection. You know, so it was a kind of a sideways approach to a straight up.
I'm sorry.
Because that was what was upheld as in the courts as home rule. And that's how this town came to not have it. In other towns.
My understanding is Dryden passed one of the first, if not the
Mm-hmm.
first one that said, we hereby ban fracking
Mhm.
and everything associated with it. It went on through the court process on appeal, went to our highest court, and they upheld Dryden's local zoning, saying that there is a ban.
Mhm.
You don't have quite that here, I don't think, but the code in our council's opinion is strong enough to pass muster and to say that that code is enforceable.
But to your question, I don't think they're adding extra chemicals to the brine water. This is part of they've got leakage into their mine, they're collecting it in their mine and they've got to put it somewhere because it erodes their pillars. It erodes the stability of the mine, having it where it is. So they're trying to pump it out of where they're actively working in mine. Is that correct? You guys don't know any additional chemicals that they're using or adding to it or anything like that?
Not underground. In fact, one of the things they pledged to do is to add waste salt to bring it up to be almost saturated, so it doesn't begin eroding pillars. Once the salt is up on the surface, they do add some chemicals to the product. One of them is ferrocyanide, which once it's in water can be toxic to certain, aquatic organisms. But the brine itself, ironically, could be the cheaper, better de-icing material. And Cargill's got, over 100 million gallons down there. But if it turns out you can do the equivalent amount of de-icing with about half as much salt. So it's not in Cargill's interest to bring the brine to the surface and sell it as a de-icing agent because it would cut demand for their salt by about 50%. So it's kind of a cynical, we're not gonna put this on the market. We think that, that would be the better thing to do.
I have two, if I could answer the question.
Of course, yes.
I have two pieces of information to pass on to the town board. The first being that I know that the Conservation and Sustainability Advisory Committee is really interested in this issue, and if it would make more sense legally to have the city's representatives through that board make that complaint to the ZBA. I think we would be willing to, with please help, put forward that. I'm not going to speak entirely to the committee, but that's something that if council thinks it's better to come from the committee that we would be.
Well, I don't think you make the complaint to the BZA, you make the complaint to the,
Zoning officer.
Zoning
Zoning officer, or whoever it is, yeah, but if it would suit better to come from us, I think that the committee is well. Passionate about this, but we'll see, we'd have to meet on it and approve, but it's something to at least think about for council. And the other thing just that we didn't get talking about here is just, what happens to the mine when it does close. At some point, this void space has an end life. all mines close eventually, you know, either catastrophically or planned. And knowing what that is important, and knowing how to prepare for that, how to monitor for subsidence, because as void space closes, the ground literally comes down. So you're gonna have subsidence issues all along the lakeshore anyways, from this mine.
But shouldn't this be under the DEC's purview and they monitor?
Town invite the EC to come and address you and ask and answer these questions.
In theory, thinking that 9 months it took to get a contract, but yes. And I say that in jest, but it has been truly difficult, as you'll remember with Brook Road, of trying to get movement there. So I think that in theory, yes, that is an excellent idea. I'm wondering if have our state representatives weighed in at all?
Have you talked to Hannah?
There are two bills, one in front of the assembly, one in front of the state senate right now, that are asking for a bond to be held in perpetuity by the state as an environmental bond. So right now it's 3.5 million that they have as decommission bond, which is kind of a joke. They barely know public service operations, and like I said, there's no real closure plan. They don't have no knowledge that's been doing any studies, but there's been no studies that we know of for a closure. So that would be more like a $10 billion number or more, so that if, you know, because these mines take about 200 years to close, hopefully take 200 years to close. And during that time, you need monitoring, potentially remediation, mitigation of issues. So that's part of that bill. The other part is requiring the EIS. As we said, there's been no EIS, which is shocking, but yeah. So that brine storage I did want to mention is actually currently happening. That was happening, and then the DEC was like, oh, maybe you should have a permit modification. And so that's actually what spurred them to ask for this permit modification. So that brine disposal is happening. The other thing I wanted to mention is it's not part of their OGS consent order to have brine disposal. It's just part of their OGS consent order to have mining. So that might be something that you'd want to talk about with the DEC.
Well, thank you very much. Not a fun topic.
Sorry for this.
Nope. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I think we have a course of action to start, you know, doing what we can do on our side to see where some avenues might lead to, because it would certainly be a very large cause of concern. So thank you so much for your time tonight. You are welcome to stay. We have some very, we have a great Jacksonville Community Park presentation, which I suspect may be more on an up note. But thank you. Thank you. Somebody's like, I am already in too many public meetings. I am fleeing. Do not blame you. Thank you so much. So the Jacksonville Community Association is going to be coming closer to 8 o'clock. So my thought was that we could work through the rest of the agenda and then rotate back when the JCA's president is joining us with Nancy to give a presentation. So the first item of old business is approval to sign the Impact Partner MOA memorandum of agreement with United Way. This allows the town to accept the funds that United Way has allocated to the youth services program, as well as the town's recreation program. And so it's a pretty straightforward. It's been reviewed and approved by council. I have a single copy here. It was posted in the agenda packet. Did anybody have any cause for concern? Okay. Then if you have no issues, I would call for a motion. Is there someone willing to move it?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. And Chris, I'm just gonna hand that to you right now.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Because that's due tomorrow. Works out well. The next item up, it was posted. We have a draft contract with MRB Group. The MRB Group has already been approved to provide consulting services in the development of the town's comprehensive plan. we are trying to move this contract through because there's gonna be a gap of 3 weeks until the next town board meeting without calling a special meeting to do that. So what this resolution does is it authorizes me to sign after I have the town attorney's approval to make minor changes. So we're at a, there may be some minor changes related to wording, but we are making sure that, there is an ethical barrier that the town board requested, in that contract between engineering and planning. And we're now just working out the fine tuning of the details between the attorney. So, if you feel comfortable with that, then, we can move forward with that contract. If not, that's fine, and we can bring back a finalized contract, on the 13th. So, for purposes of discussion, is there a motion to approve in a second, and then we can discuss?
So move.
So,
Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, then I will call the question. All those in favor? Aye, thank you. And then, next up is, the authorizing the use of the ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan Act funds for special projects that the town has already done that were included in the original, scope of things that we were, covering. So this includes, the IT modernization. The original estimate was $42,000. That came in at $27,069. So some savings from our original estimation. The part, Yep. And, I mean, there are some tiny small things. There's like a phishing campaign that's part of it, but like this, for all practical purposes, that project is done. So, the final phase was the installation of our new phone system. So that's, been a change. But it's,
is it working now?
it is, you know what the best thing is I get emails every time I get a phone message, and that's what everybody does, which is great to have multiple sources of documentation on it. So that's one of the things. It's for us, so many staff work part-time, they can actually timely get those messages. So that's one huge call. But Krista, what do you think about the new system?
Yeah, I think that is a good feature. You know, when I'm working at home on Wednesdays. Just to be able
Does it
to-
do voice recognition? I mean, it like dictates what,
Mine does.
so like if we leave you
No,
a
It
message.
just sends you a recording.
Mhm.
It's got a lot of features. I don't even know all the features yet, but it's improvement.
Do you still have a physical phone?
Yeah,
Yes.
yep. Oh, yeah, it's still a physical phone. Yep. And I think we figured out our phones were what, 25 years old?
You have to talk to your computer, the thing starts ringing and you're like, for 50 years, you're used to picking up the handset. You go, crap, what do I click on?
We still do have a physical phone, so. The next town phone upgrade is definitely not going to have one, I bet, but we still do. And then, so that was the IT modernization, and then the parking lot renovations, the scoping and estimate work that we had to do in order to get it to the RF stage. That came in, its original estimate was $27.95, and that came in as the final cost on that. And then we also had allocated, the town board authorized the town hall safety assessment, and the estimate was $27,550. I'm sorry, $1,250, and the actual was $1,250. So this is, the town board has already approved these. We're just making it very clear, in the record that these are clearly allocated from the ARPA funds. So, we can happy to discuss. To get to discussion, is there somebody willing to move this?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, any questions or concerns?
Not me.
Okay, then I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Into new business, we've already had the clean presentation. And then, an item up, and I want to recognize that Carl, who's our newly elevated planning board chair, is in attendance. And at our request. So thank you so much for making time for us tonight on a Tuesday. You're here already on a couple Tuesdays a month. So I was going to suggest there are some, I know the planning, I'm sensitive to wanting to ensure good communications between the two boards in advance of more activities happening. And my suggestion, and this really is coming, this is coming from me, is that there is some kind of, doesn't need to be formalized per se, but a kind of working group among people who've already been identified as participants in in the planning process to be in communication with each other. And I think it could be kind of an ad hoc thing to do, but what I was thinking, and here's what is prefacing this, is that I know the planning board is starting to talk about recommendations they may have about changes to the zoning code. And I think your insights are great and I want to hear them, but I want to make sure that we are doing it within what I don't want to have happen is for the planning board to put a ton of time and interest into something and then come to the town board and the town board's like, what? Like, we didn't know you were working on that, or we didn't know you'd spend that much time on that. And we're not able, comfortable, willing to do something now for ABC reasons. It could be because the comp plan is in process and we're planning to do zoning updates probably starting in probably in 26 and do a comprehensive zoning update. It could be any number of things. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to disrespect the planning board. And I want to value the work that is being done by planning board members. And so I was hoping that an ad hoc group of people already involved with both boards could periodically come together to facilitate conversations. So we know there's really good communication happening. And so my thought it would be our planning board liaison. I would like my deputy to attend, as well as the planning chair. And if somebody else from the planning board was interested, that the planning board identified, as well as the town planner. And that, maybe, I don't think it has to be something that's meeting as often as the B committee or the planning board, but it may make sense to have periodic conversations just to make sure that those lines of communication don't fray again. So that was my idea. So I wanted to throw that out there for discussion.
So we were throwing some ideas out there on what it came up because many of their reviews had to do with water and waterways, and Rebecca was she's a sort of the water expert, and brought up because of the technology improvements over the original like Army Corps mapping that happened like in the 50s. The orographic mapping, we can identify waterways better. And so they were trying to figure out, okay, what are we enforcing? What is a waterway, right? So started with that discussion, and Rich did, the liaison long enough. It's really interesting to listen to them work because they are now reading our zoning code and trying to enforce something. There's a few typos in there, let's say, or things that might be missing. So we were discussing things that we might want to work on over the course of the year. So when they had a very light agenda, they had things we could pick off. And so we hadn't, what did we list off, 5 or 6 ideas?
Currently about 4, your summary on the July 2nd meeting was the sign ordinance. Apparently there was a New York State Supreme Court ruling that says within a specific zone, all the authorized uses have to be treated the same. And we have very definite different solutions for gas stations and businesses and all that in the OPMU and the business zone. We're clearly in violation in that in the sign section. So do we address that and try and fix that? Anyway, that's the first one we were talking about looking at. Second one is noise. That's the real touchy one there. Permitted events are covered, but it's things that, the neighbors go crazy here on a regular basis, or I've heard now that I haven't gone down to the Teganic Inn on Tuesday nights when they do their burger night or whatever they do down there, and it includes fireworks in that. Was that a permitted use? I don't know. Or is it just what they've set up with the state park? That's what they're gonna do. That one falls into noise. The water issue, the reason I bring up the stream stuff and that sort of stuff right now, if you go into the GIS data, and that is what Niels uses all the time. There are about 50 extra intermittent streams within the town of Ulysses that are not covered under the. Our ordinance clearly steers you to the USGS 7.5 minute data. It never addresses using any of the GIS stuff. I've reviewed the town minutes since 2018 when GIS was invented. It first introduced to the town, and the town board has never made a decision or discussion that I can find about using the GIS data. The reason I kind of get into this, if we're doing the zoning update, and in our contract that we put out, or our RFQ, we specifically talked about using GIS data and that sort of stuff. Well, if the town has never approved use of the GIS system, and yet technology is there and we're going to use it, I think we need to take a closer look at that, from the town board perspective of what do you want used, what do you don't want used? And I experimented at the Winterfest with all of the different, a map of all the, what GIS says is residential or agricultural and that sort of stuff. And I got a lot of feedback from Ms. Weatherby and several other folks that says, well, 80 acres of my farm, there's 5 acres for the house and the other 75 acres is an active cropland. But the GIS data shows it as being residential. There's some real ugly problems with GIS data. So what we want to use, what we don't use out of that, I think we need to really get into. And then the other one that Mr. Boggs has brought up a few times is to look at the development districts, particularly the defunct ones that are just kind of sitting there. Do we do something with those? Anyhow, that's the 4 areas that we're looking at this point in time. But we're certainly looking for input from the town board, what you would like us to work on and coordinate with you if there's a planned revision coming up 2 years up the road or something like that. That some of these may be driven like the sign issue by court decisions might drive it ahead of time. But that's really what we're looking for and figuring out how we can best support the town.
Well, I think for me, you nailed it when you said coordination, and that's really what I would like to focus on is coordinating it so that energy and activities are done in such a way that facilitates a functional outcome. In some cases, it, like you said, it may very well be that there's necessity born from requests to the town board because of ownership changes or changes within a development district, but it also could be, like you pointed out, that there's, since the zoning has been updated, in 2019, that there has been court legislation, there's been not court legislation, there's been court findings that certain things are not or are appropriate. And so right sizing our zoning makes sense to that. I would just like, I think that having a small group in conversation my hope is that that could facilitate that and figure out the plan of how it all fits together, because and I wasn't on the town board, so I'm not throwing any stones when I say this, because I know how things get done and get complicated. But the comp plan was adopted in 2009 and the zoning was updated in 2019, and that is not a usual or desirable timeline. So what the town, and we're going to get to it in just a minute, is that in terms of active projects looking forward through the rest of this year into 2025, my intention is to start going after grant funds next year for our zoning update, so that when we wrap up the comprehensive plan at the end of 2025, we can pivot then to, after we get our contract from DEC 9 months later, we can, we can pivot towards actually hiring a consultant to facilitate the zoning update. And so that there's not a huge lag time between the collection of data, the development of a plan, and fixing the zoning. There definitely are things we can do to fix the zoning as we go. And that very well may be the case. But I'd like to do it in a coordinated way to ensure that, because there's cost associated with every time we change the zoning, right? There's a there's a land there, you have to go through a local law process. There's fees associated with the review. I mean, it's not an inconsiderable amount of work. And so I think if you guys are willing, if that makes sense, if you wouldn't mind bringing that back to the planning board to see if that sounds amenable to the planning board. Again, I don't think this requires any actual action from either board, but I think it's just an opportunity for a small group of 5 with 2 representatives from each board to be in direct communication so that we can avoid any miscommunications of this kind, at least in the future. I'm sure we'll have other miscommunications. We'll not solve everything with this one thing, but does that sound good to
Yeah.
the board?
Carl, one thing, for example, the thing like the fireworks at the Hurricane. Mark and Niels should be able to weigh in on that and say if they need a permit or they don't. I think if they need a special permit, I think, to do fireworks. So I think if they're in violation of that, then Mark can go talk to
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, I don't know if they've gotten one that says we're gonna do it every Tuesday night from April to September when we're open or something like that. And I'll pass the question on to Mark and Niels and ask them specifically about.
Sounds good. Excellent. Anything else on?
I think these are the 4 items that we settled on, because we've only just briefly talked about them at the ends of the meeting, so if we pick the topics and have a couple of sentences after it, is that what we're?
Well, yeah, no, my thought was just you got the 5 of you or 4 of you just get around the table and and talk about what the town board, like a plan that the town board might have in terms of priorities and what's reasonable. And staff will be present too, who can give feedback. And planning board can talk about what they've seen, because I will guarantee that you will have more complaints about our zoning than we can address before we do a zoning update. And the reason is because I have complaints and our planner has complaints and our previous planner had complaints. And so, but what would be super helpful is pick away at what we can pick away at that makes reasonable sense, given the timeline and given the subject, and also making sure that we're keeping track of what those complaints are. So as we do a more comprehensive zoning update, we can address those issues. So I think it's a multifaceted approach. But I think that's best suited for, I don't want to call town board and the planning board for multiple special meetings just to have this conversation. I think that you're well suited to start those conversations, if that makes sense. So that was my intention. And I think it'll evolve organically as you meet and have those conversations. So.
Are we coming on the interviews for the planning board?
I will follow up tomorrow. I don't know off the top of my head. Okay. And then if you're all right, we can move to, it looks like Jacksonville Community Association's ready. Oh, wonderful. And Carl, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay.
So we'll. Get a couple emails going back and forth.
Right.
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Good.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it. So then I would like to welcome up Jonathan and Nancy to do the presentation. That would be best, because then everybody can see you and then there's a microphone right here. Well, that helps also to see your presentation.
Thank you. For people who may not know, I am Nancy Zaylor, and I am delighted to be back here with you.
On the other side here. Yeah. Can I squeeze through?
Yeah.
Snip some off the camera.
Yeah.
Good way to start.
So thank you for the opportunity. I'm wearing a different hat tonight as a member of the Jacksonville Community Association Board. And I'm thrilled to introduce Jonathan Froelich, our new president, and thought he's eager to get to know you and for you to know him. Will you just say a little bit about yourself? They've given us 10 minutes, so I'm gonna keep my clock here.
All right.
And then we'll get into the presentation.
Thank you for having us. Is there a way to know for sure if people can hear us on Zoom or?
They can.
They can, all right. I've lived in Jacksonville on Clover Grove Road for going on 4 years. My son just graduated high school, but he's been in the Trumansburg district for about 11 years now. So I've been in the area and I'm from here. So I started attending the Jacksonville Community Association board meetings last fall and then decided to try and get more involved. So this is a learning year for me about history of JCA and learning the relationships between the JCA town and various entities. And excited to be helping move forward some work to improve the park and improve our just the way we operate. get to know everyone. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, as you know, Angie had been the president of the association for many years, and of course, we lost him to the Rochester area, but we're thrilled to have Jonathan as our new president. So Krista, can you go to the next slide? Oops. I didn't think I had put all those delays in, so just, there we go. Yeah, so the Jacksonville Community Association is a 501c3. And I just wanted to take just a minute to recap our mission. Jonathan will talk more about our board of directors and just I'll touch back on our memorandum of understanding. Mission basically is that our organization is designed to bring together people in the Hamlet community and that in ways that can address our shared interests and concerns. And that it's been active over many, many years from advocating for clean water after the gas spill to a community newsletter to bring share information. They set up a crime watch, but really since probably 2017, the other part of our mission, which is being the steward of a park, has been sort of more at the forefront of what we've been doing. So that's probably enough about that. Can you fill us in on who's on the
Sure.
board of directors?
We have an annual meeting every fall, and this past September, I joined as president, and Rachel Conroy joined as our secretary. So that we're the two new members of the board. And the board is currently comprised of 5 total members. Pete has recently stepped down. Nancy is our vice president. Cameron Newhoff is our treasurer.
And then from
And Corman, of course. Who's been serving for a number of years now, I believe.
yeah. And so just to remind people, you've had it in 2017, the town board and the Jacksonville Community Association entered into a memorandum of understanding. Because at that time, the town board thought it was in the town's interest to have this wonderful resource be a town park or a park available to town residents. And although it's privately held by our nonprofit, we agreed under the memorandum of understanding to ensure the park, maintain the park, and open it to residents. And the town, for the town's part, you have agreed very generously to each year allocate some funds so that we can maintain the park and make improvements so that it can welcome our community more. And the other part of the memorandum of understanding, which started in 2017, has been renewed and now will go through 2026. It provides for are you calling it now the DPW?
Yeah.
The newly created Department of Public Works will continue to mow the property for us, which is a huge in-kind contribution. We're very grateful. So that's just a little background, but mostly this is about an update about what we've been doing. So Krista, take us to the next slide. So again, this is, I think people in this room know, but others may not know that it's about 10 acres located down a long driveway from Swamp College Road in the hamlet. And we are open dawn to dusk. We actually need some better signage to say that more plainly, because we learned from the Salo habitat, if we don't have some hours posted, the police cannot follow up and say someone is there in violation of our rules, but we're working on that. And we are, as we said, supported mostly by the town, but we have over the years gotten some grants and some donations. So next. So in both the county comprehensive plan and the town's 2009 comprehensive plan, can you click again? There may be numbers there, not numbers, but dates. In both those comprehensive plans, Jacksonville was called out as an area that would deserve a special area plan. But in reality, neither the planning, the time for doing that kind of a plan never really existed at the town or the county level. So the Jacksonville Community Association, at that time under Pete's leadership, said, why don't we try to do some planning? And with the town's help, we, next slides, please. We together.
The slides are not advancing on Zoom.
Oh. Well, this slide says that, that together, we approached Cornell's Design Connect students to help us create a master plan, not for the community, but for the park. And in 2019, they did a great job of engaging the community, seeking input about what people would want in a park to make it feel like a place they would go and feel safe and comfortable. And they made a number of recommendations, the first of which the Jacksonville Community Association Board picked up on was creating an ADA compliant restroom. And so some people on this board know this has been a long time coming. We built the building in 2019, but it had to be built close to the Namaste School because that's as far as the extension cord ran, because there is no electricity at the park. Then it was moved to the site that the health department said would be the most appropriate for a restroom. And then systematically, we laid a water line, put in a septic system, and last year put in the leach field. And then we are, fingers crossed, very close to having the sink, toilet, grab bars, all the rest of what we need to outfit that restroom and make it operational by August of this year. So that was step one. And then we said, well, let's take a look at, we could go to the next slide, Carissa. The next slide is a photograph of the pavilion at the park, which is been there for probably at least 60 years, and the grass around it looks lovely, but it's very bumpy. So anybody trying to get to the pavilion or to the restroom, which is just beyond the pavilion, would have a difficult time. So as part of our accessibility effort, we go to the next slide, please. Then what we did was actually, with help from the town's recreation director, Will Glennon, who teaches at SUNY Cortland in the recreation department, he got a class who did recreation administration to develop an accessibility plan for the park. And there were two key elements of that we tackled. One was to have an ADA parking area close to the pavilion, and then to get from that parking area to the pavilion and the restroom beyond it, we wanted an ADA compliant path. And those were, again, this was the county helped with the building of the building. The county helped with us being able to contract for this service, and the town's contribution helped make that possible. It got put in at the end of 23 under sort of terrible weather conditions, so we were still working on it in 24. And our goal is eventually to have that surface be similar to what people who walk on the Black Diamond Trail know as a path that is able to, ride a bike on. We don't recommend riding bikes on this, but being able to roll or stroll on that path. And then next slide, we said, okay, well, now if we can get people to the pavilion, what if somebody's in a wheelchair? Go one more, Krista, please. If they can get to the pavilion, where can they sit? We've just got picnic tables there. And most picnic tables don't allow somebody in a wheelchair to pull up because you're banging against the crossbars of a picnic table. So an ADA compliant picnic table was something we were hoping to do. And with a small grant from the Rotary of Ithaca, we built that. And as you can see there, it looks pretty much like a picnic table, but its ends are extended. So you can roll under them Or if you're on a rolling walker, you can roll your walker up and sit on a seat like that, or child strollers can pull up to that. So we are sort of on our way with some of this phase of the physical aspect. And along the way, next slide, Carissa. This is an area where Jonathan was mentioning that he came to the community meeting last October, and it was a really big turnout. Actually, Caitlin came to part of that meeting as well. There was a big turnout, partly because everybody wanted to know about the playing fields. But they were interested in JCA, and out of that, we elected 3 new board members. And that has made a difference. We've got talented people like Jonathan, his background, and Rachel Conroy as our secretary. She's great at like graphic design and marketing. So use those skills to advertise for our spring cleanup. And we got, I think it's around 25. We tried to have everybody sign in, but some people just wanted to walk up and grab a rake and get going, and so they didn't sign in. But we had at least 20 to 25 people, which is the largest number that has been at a cleanup. I've gone for probably about 10 years, and that's the biggest number that we've had. And so people were excited to be there. Some were there for the first time. I mean, most people don't know about this park. We call it the little hidden gem because you can't see it from Swamp College Road. You have to drive up that long driveway. And so that event generated some interest. And on that same day, we usually try to have the cleanup around Earth Day. And so we this year it coincided also with Arbor Day. And so the town's tree committee brought a tree and planted it for us. So we have that now. And we are excited that the first time since COVID, we actually have a family has contacted us and said, we'd like to have our child's 1-year birthday party at the park. Can we do that? It's like, oh, let me check our reservation form. It doesn't exist, but we'll create it. But we said, sure, we'd love to have them. And that is one of the ways in which we want to be able to promote. And those are the kinds of ways that we want people to take advantage of the park. And I was thrilled just last week when the town's new program manager, Zach, called me to say, hey, I've been in that park. Could we use it for programs with our middle schoolers? Could we set up a fishing workshop? Could we come have the young people help clean up, which community service is always something that I'm excited about. So we expect to have new enthusiasm and new activity going on with the park. And Jonathan, will you, since you're the new leader, want to talk about some ideas for the future?
Yeah, can you go to the next slide, please? So as we head towards the end of the year, our board, our team will be talking more about how to be strategic about next year and prioritize some of the work we want to do. How do we, a lot of what I'm thinking about is how do we organize our work and try and ensure everything's transparent and that we're being efficient and having good systems for communication. But for our focus really is on how to make the park more accessible, more viable, get more people excited about coming to the park. And some of the things that we're considering for next year is adding something like a new visitor kiosk where we could invite folks to actually sign in and then hopefully capture more data about who's coming to the park. With that, we're thinking about opportunities for areas where we might add signage. And like a visitor kiosk, for example, could have something like a park map on there, or some information about the flora and fauna, or the birds that you might encounter if you're walking the trails of the park. That goal being to really just increase and have a better way to monitor park use and rentals. Once the restroom is complete, we anticipate there being more interest in folks using it for events and programming. With some of the landscaping, we're considering a path to the fishing pavilion. There's a pavilion to the right when you come in, named after Dave Sherman. And so adding a path to make that access to that even more accessible is an exciting idea. And where the berm is, that's new. It's a new addition to the parking lot. Considering trying to bring in some topsoil there or doing some additional landscaping. Similarly, thinking about whether we try and add an ADA compliant community garden in the sort of flatter area, and then, you know, thinking about what that might look like and how might we manage something like that. So a lot of different things that we're excited to think about and explore that all have, I think, high potential. And they're all things that I'm hoping by the end of the year we'll be able to circle a couple of them and have some viable actionable ideas that we can execute for 2025.
Yeah. So that's really, so you're right. You had a difficult presentation earlier about some challenging stuff, but we're the good news people, because good people are doing good things in a beautiful part of the town, and we're grateful for your help and support. And if you, last slide is just the thank you slide. There it is. We do get some donations from Namaste on an annual basis. This year we got a donation from Rotary, but you know, that may change too as we look forward and try to do more planning. So I don't know if there are questions. We're happy to field them if you like.
Any questions from the board?
You're doing
What
great.
kind of shape is the loop trail in? Because that's something you could enhance to
The which?
the loop trail.
Yeah, well, you were
Yeah.
working on that trail during.
Yeah, I haven't run the trail in a couple months, but during our park cleanup, Anne was excited to have her zero turn out there and be dragging gravel around. So we spread quite a bit of gravel throughout the trail, covering a lot of mud patches, and we were able to pretty much clear all the branches from any spots in the trail where maybe you couldn't get to comfortably, and then pull them off the trail. I haven't gone back to see what new growth there's been, but
Yeah, I walked it just like a week or two ago, and it's still pretty well cleared. I don't know if anybody's been in there to tune it up, but it was cut way back.
Yes.
The loop trail, there are many different trails that go off into the 10 acres, and some of those are probably not quite as well groomed as the loop trail, but both the master plan and the accessibility plan, of course, call for, recommended that whole area either have boardwalk or something to make it the whole route accessible. So it's like if we, as Jonathan was saying, if we could inch toward the fishing. It's Dave Sherman Pavilion, but I was out there one day doing something and saw a couple of guys fishing there, and I then saw other people using that access to the pond for fishing, so that I'm calling it the fishing pavilion. So if we can inch that way, I think incrementally, I think we want to make, ideally, in a perfect world, we would have the whole loop at least be accessible. We're not currently thinking as grandiose as the landscape and architecture students were in the master plan, which is get the right of way from all of the homes in the heart of Jacksonville, from the gas station to the park, so that people can walk on a boardwalk over the marshy area to the park and avoid walking on Route 96. Because if you don't drive to the park, I mean, you can ride a bike, but I mean, sort of, if you want to walk from somewhere else in the hamlet, it's challenging.
Yeah.
So we're not quite there, but incrementally, we're trying to make it better.
That's
Great,
wonderful.
thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
for all
you.
the hard work. It is a lot to undertake. So thank you
It's a
for,
small group, but we get stuff done.
well, it's
So,
great to
thank you.
see, it's great to see more people getting involved. Thank you.
Yeah. That's.
Okay. Speaking of projects, I'll move on to, I just wanted to, as we're gonna go into budget season, I just wanted to kind of put on everybody's radar screen. The town is tackling a lot of big projects. So listed under 2024, I just want to keep it in front of people about where we are in moving in the direction of needing to tackle finishing up this year, which some of it will percolate into 2024, and then also to be mindful of projects that we're looking forward to in 2025. In 2025 in particular, town hall and town hall barn solar panel project creation is gonna have to start happening because our lease ends in 2026. So in early 2025, we're gonna have to start tackling that. The construction will be happening in the back parking lot next year. We'll be working on the comp plan update. And the facilities, we're gonna be under contract this year, but the work will be done with the ADA accessible door. One recommendation that came from our town attorney, and it seems like it'll work. I will bring it back to the town board for full consideration, is we might actually be able to just loop oversight of that into the Barton and LaJudas contract as an addendum. So that when we do the parking lot, that could actually be accomplished simultaneously, so that there's synergy between those processes instead of separating them out. But that's just an idea to expedite the process. It's actually been challenging to find contractors willing to tackle what is a relatively minor project. We're continuing to transition to the DPW. They're in Carissa's office for records retention. There are a lot of records related projects associated with our ongoing transition to move away from paper files and our vast storage of them to more of a paperless system for the future. That doesn't happen overnight. Work is going to be dedicated to that. I mentioned before zoning update. We need to start hunting for money next year. So the next summer's consolidated funding application round. That's the reasonable time to seek money. We received the funds for Maplewood, so we're going to be in the design phase in 2025 for that. Same is true for Curry Road culvert. There's a duplication, so we're not doing two Maplewood culvert rehabilitations, it's just one. Camp Barton, it looks like we don't have a final date on Camp Barton. It's looking like it'll be later this summer. Again, nothing is holding it up except New York State at this point. And so they will tell us when that's good to go, and we'll have about a 3-week notice when that closes. When that happens, while the town itself internally staff don't necessarily work on it unless we have a contract with the LDC to provide services. That's certainly something that Rich and I have been working on, and will continue to require time of town board members. And then ongoing facilities issues, and also because facilities always need attention, and also planning for recreation and youth development, and that's going to be in correlation largely with Camp Barton and just the evolution of projects. So these are all things that we already have our foot in process in moving towards. So as we get into the budget season, this is a document that can be an evolving document, and we don't need to run through all of it, but these are the future wish list. These are things that have been, this is not just, I put down a list of things that I have a future list on. These are things that have been compiled over the last number of years from this town board and actually previous town boards of needs that are going to potentially need to be addressed either by desire or necessity in some cases.
What is a multimodality transportation system?
So a multimodality system is thinking about transportation in your municipality in a way that is not singularly focused on cars. And so it's what is the role of bicycles what role do we have in facilitating bike and pedestrian access in the town? And we should be thinking about that. That's probably how the town thinks about that should be embedded into the comp plan. Like if it emerged that the residents really want to make sure that we are considering multimodal transportation, that is something that could come out as a wish list item out of the comprehensive plan. And the way that I think that it would be most reasonably accomplish in certain cases is as we have plans to improve certain segments of road, we might want to consider in that time building in bike lanes within our right of way. That might be part of an integrated approach. But it's really of how do we escape being, a car focused society? And it can also be looking at how do we look at public transportation in innovative ways to serve our community. So that's what that. And then I also wanted to make sure that you saw that this was posted in the packet, that we do know what our tax cap is for this year. Our percentage increase, we're capped at, unless we override it, is 2.98%, which is an increase of $48,065. And it's obviously more complicated than that in the different pieces of it, but I did want to bring that we just have that information. So that'll be factoring in. I also wanted to understand from the town board if there is any desire to consider a tax cap override. Some municipalities do it. We historically did an override just as a course of business. That's common. But in the last, we've never actually overridden it in the actual. And so would you prefer, and last year we did not do an override. It can provide a safety valve, but it's not necessarily necessary if we have healthy fund balance. So what were your thoughts? Because there's a timeline, and so I'd want to bring it forward.
Yeah, what's the timeline for approving that? Is it before the budget is prepared?
So I would have to look and see what the exact timeline is. I know right now that you could think about it tonight, and you can think about it at the August meeting. And if we needed to move forward on that, I think it's sometime in September that we would have to knock it out.
Well, in a way, it kind of forces us to be, prudent in our spending decisions.
And I believe that's what New York State was trying to do.
Yeah.
So it's
well, the assessment will pay up too.
Yeah, the assessment will be up.
Yep.
108 million.
So assessment went way up, but the tax cap does. So it'll be a percentage increase. So we can only increase the 2025 budget 2.98%, which I will point out is well under inflation. So
Right. And given what we're about to talk about in terms of salary structures, we may have 2.98 is not very.
not a lot.
But it doesn't hurt to pass it. Right?
Yeah, it does.
We don't have to use it.
No, and we never have.
Right.
I mean,
But I think it's not a bad idea in case we need it. Otherwise, it could hamper us if something came up that we didn't think about and needed to use it. Not that we ever have.
No, what do you think?
I think it's safe to pass it, and then if we still think we have enough reserves to absorb it, so.
We have plenty of reserves and fund balance.
Yeah, and lots of fund balance.
There's a lot of things on our agenda.
Right.
Yeah.
So to give us flexibility, I think maybe we pass it and just be honor our practice.
well, I mean, certainly we're not passing it tonight.
Right.
So what I can do is I can bring it, think about it. You got a few weeks to think about it. I mean, I think it's prudent to pass because of the unknowns that still remain. That being said, I'm also in favor of not overriding.
Right.
I have been I like having the lowest tax rate in Tompkins County and among our neighbors. And so trying to work within our boundaries, I think is really good. So my recommendation would be that we bring it back. I would vote in favor of override as a safety at this juncture. But I also am in favor in staying below the tax cap.
Yeah. Thank you all.
So,
Where are we in year number for the ambulance and fire district adjustments?
so we're gonna be in, no, you put me on the spot. I believe we're going into next year will be either year 2 or 3. And I will have to check. I honestly can't remember off the top of my head.
5 years.
It's a 5-year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to have another joint meeting. It's not been scheduled yet. The joint meeting will happen either late August, early September, where they're gonna be presenting. I have heard rumblings that the village is thinking about changing the funding structure for ambulance, as not in the same way necessarily that they did for fire, but looking at the modeling. That comes as a surprise to no one sitting here, right? So, so that's the other big unknown. So that's
Another reason to.
That's
pass
another-
that tax cut.
Yeah.
because
That
we're-
could be a lot of, that's a lot of money.
we are in the position of that you have to have fire. So we know that fire is gonna go up because of that model. And that's a 20% increase to get, for anybody watching, there was a change a couple of years ago in how the village determines funding, the bills that the town has. By law, we have to provide fire. By law, we do not have to provide ambulance, but I do not hear anybody clamoring to lose ambulance service. So in the town of Ulysses, we currently have 2 options for ambulance, which is the village or trying to contract with a private entity. So both of those are expensive because ambulances are medical services and medical services are costly. So, but I will have more information on that, and the village is in the process of looking at a new billing entity because of, and I don't know if they've settled on a final contract, but they did engage us in the RFQ review process for new billing companies so that we can try and do better in revenue related to that. So,
Okay.
um,
Question.
yeah, so why don't we do, so let's go quickly through I think, we do have, I wanted to do, and the reason I brought this is the next item is the recognizing me as the budget officer, because Michelle is, reducing her hours significantly, to go to graduate school. By my position, I am de facto budget officer, unless it's allocated to somebody else. So I'm going to take it back over as of August 12th. The reason I wanted this is because in here is I wanted it codified in the resolution. So if there's any ever question of when it happened, it's in the resolutions and it's easy to find. Things get lost because there's so many documents. And so I would request a motion on that.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Hi.
And then the final is if you did have budget requests, I passed out that paperwork at the last town board meeting. If you have budget requests above and beyond what you're doing with your committees or anything like that, please submit them by July 26th, and you can submit them to either Michelle or to me. And then I was going to do executive session at the end quickly. Upcoming events, the next meeting is on August 13th. The town did cancel the regular meeting on the 27th. And I was hoping we may need to do a special town board meeting the week of August 19th, and I was wondering if town board members may be available either the 20th or the 21st at 5 o'clock. Or sorry, yes, 20th or 21st. It's a Tuesday or Wednesday. Are those? Okay. I will have to check with Liz.
Oh.
Are you traveling that week?
No.
Okay.
I do, I did sign up for the citizen planner training.
Oh, what day? I can't.
That's on the 20th.
So maybe the 21st?
Would that be at 7?
No, it'd be at 5, be
5?
early.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will check with Liz on that. And again, it's not a sure thing, but 21st. Okay. Okay, And then Labor Day, which is hard to believe that I'm putting Labor Day on the schedule, and yet I am. So we close then. So that brings us to approval of the minutes. I only caught one typo, which is that it has us ending the meeting like 45 or half an hour after. It's like the time I think is off on when we ended the meeting, because we came out of executive session and then immediately Rich moved to adjourn. And so I think those times are actually probably within 30 seconds of each other.
We'll fix that, thank you.
Well, that was the only thing I caught. Is there anybody else have anything? Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And that brings us full circle back to privilege of the floor. And everyone is welcome to 3 minutes. I'll go back and forth in person. And it does not look like, so yep, I will not be going back and forth. I'll be right here. So would you care to speak?
Care to speak. Thank you, and I brought handouts, so you don't have to remember or hear everything I say. Sure, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great.
Thank you.
And then you also have things here for your.
Thank you. I'm not up.
So I'm Vivian Rose. I live in Trumansburg, the town of Ulysses resident, and I'm here today because as I read minutes, I see things that look like we're getting bigger, like we're gonna have a new deputy supervisor, we have a DPW, where it looks like recreation is moving bigger. We may have a bigger development district down near Teganic Falls to go along with that beautiful new parking lot at the top of Teganic Falls. So this concerns me in relation to noise, but it also concerns me just in relation to development, because this is a rare and beautiful community that has not yet overdeveloped. So I wanted to bring to you some information about model legislation that will allow homeowners to assist, because when development happens and the property maintenance code comes in, as a way that people have to maintain their properties, we immediately go into, it has to be turf, it can be invasives, it can be cultivars, and it can be pesticide use. All of which have been implicated in declining native pollinators, which, and Tompkins County doesn't have any particular local ordinance. The village does not. I don't know that the town of Ulysses does, that protects private property owners.
Does not.
But you already have a bee committee, so you're already ahead of the game. So this material that I'm sharing with you is could be useful to you in enacting a local law that assures private property owners' rights to cultivate and maintain native habitat, that informs zoning that requires developers to use minimum amounts of native plant species, that the town itself starts installing and maintaining only native species, and that we prohibit use of New York State prohibited or invasive plants on any property within the town. The reason for this is, as is well known, that humans have used up everything pretty much. So the only place that's left where people can make a difference is in their own yard. And as the recipient of a mow your yard order, I find very little room in the New York State code beyond cultivating. So I am cultivating everything in the yard to make sure that it is available to the pollinators who are in deep decline, the bees and the birds and the other. And when I mowed my lawn, I saw many of the creatures who live there besides me, who don't have other places to live. So I provided you some model legislation. The town of Sylvan, North Carolina, for instance, recent zoning regulations requires all development use all native non-invasive species in all their landscape. Town of Victor, New York has 70% plant species. So these are resources for you to use. I want to thank you for all of the things that you're doing. Every time I come to one of your meetings, I'm just astonished at how much work you have to do on our behalf. And I'm really grateful, very grateful.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I did want to note that the deputy supervisor is not a new position. It's gone back. The second deputy has existed, two site supervisors before me. So it's one is going to grad school and that's why we're hiring our replacement. So that's,
So there's not gonna be two,
no,
because the title of second.
it is.
deputy.
Rich is my primary,
Uh-huh.
but he's
He
not on
doesn't
staff.
get paid for that.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think, the part that caught my attention was not an elected official.
yeah, and it goes back. I don't know when you guys created it, but it's gone back to 20. Yeah, it goes back a long time.
Well, as a board, as a member of the public, it looked like you're getting bigger. So, thank you, because
Sure.
we're gonna get bigger, let property owners help. Maintain our ecosystem.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, we do have an executive session on the agenda for matters related to union negotiations. There is a motion to go. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so
Who is the governor?
okay, may I have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The town board met in executive session for matters related to union negotiations. We took no action. And we are back in public session and it is the end of our meeting, so.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's
Go.
Justin.